So it's wonderful to be here with you tonight. Some faces that are familiar and many that are not. That's great. So Mushin asked me to give this talk on Prajna Paramita, and what I really loved is I have no idea how it's being talked about in your community or what's been said or what's been emphasized. So I just had to dive in by my own instincts and speak about what just came to mind. And the talk is kind of like a wandering stream. And hope you can follow this stream with me. So Maha Prajna Paramita. And Maha means great. And Prajna, wisdom, and Paramita, the perfection. Maha Prajna Paramita, the mother of wisdom, the embodiment of wisdom, the function of wisdom, neither something nor nothing, neither a process nor an object or a thing or a state. And in the scriptures, we find Prajnaparamita is described, expressed as ungraspable and undefinable and like space, without herself coming into being like all things. And then you wonder, well, why the deified form? Is this principle related to as a goddess? So perhaps through image, put us in relationship with Prajnaparamita as beyond, as transpersonal. Prajnaparamita as wisdom, not as a possession, but when we are dispossessed of ourselves. When the energies of body-mind aren't laid claim to by that very body-mind. Prajnaparamita, the absence of tight identity, what is possible when there aren't crowded thoughts. Why is Prajnaparamita deified? Deified because source of profound relief and venerable for that. Deified because not a spiritual phenomena existing apart from matter, worthy of veneration because in herself there is no necessity for the designations between spirit and matter, form and emptiness, even wisdom and stupidity. That distinction is not relevant. So I don't know whether you went into the etymology of the word prajna. It's a Sanskrit word, and the Sanskrit jna, and forgive me for those who actually know Sanskrit, the Sanskrit jna and the Greek know of gnosis have a common root, and they both mean knowledge. So both gnosis and prajna are pointing to modes of direct knowledge. Perhaps the starting place in our practice and the realm we mostly live within in our everyday is ordinary knowing, is knowing objects. We know objects. We are living in a world of things that are out there, and ordinary knowing includes knowing their patterns and their characteristics. Ordinary knowing includes the skills that we've learned and the techniques that we may have accumulated. It's subjective observation. It's done by a self. In this kind of awareness, in ordinary knowing, we know things from the outside. We know things from the outside. Mind meets object. Mind meets a surface. Mind relates to the face, to the skin of things. Now the skin of things may reveal the core, but it may not. So in our ordinary realm of knowing, we are, in a sense, an object moving around in a world of objects, kind of like being a ball in a pinball machine, banging into things and being banged around. Now, mindfulness and science, I think, share the necessity for training in method and technique, development of a tool for a less biased study and examination of things. Less biased study and examination of things in order to arrive at what is presumed to be an accurate knowledge and actually seeing what is there, seeing what can be seen. We have from classical Buddhism what you might call the foundation of Buddhist contemplative practice, which is mindfulness. The foundations of mindfulness, body as body, thought as thought, feeling as feeling. Those foundations have something to do with meeting these phenomena of ourselves in a direct way. In a direct way. And in knowing them directly, the true characteristics can be known. So the classic insights that are said to be the fruit of this direct observation of our own experience, the sensations of your body, your breath, your feelings, your thoughts, consciousness itself, the wisdom that's said to arise from that, the ordinary wisdom, is impermanence and selflessness, and that clinging to things contracts our being, closes the heart, closes possibility. Sometimes that's defined as dukkha, or suffering, this contraction. So you could say in our practice, when we're practicing mindfulness, we're really developing and amplifying this capacity for an ordinary knowing where it's not quite ordinary in the same way, because we're developing the tool in our own mind to be able to observe how we really be, what the nature of the mind is in direct observation. Now, subject and object necessitate each other. Subject and object co-arise. They give rise to each other. You cannot have one without the other. Subject being the self and object being anything that the self knows. So observation takes an observer. So in this mode of awareness, as liberating as it may be, and as much relief from unnecessary pain as a mindfulness practice can bring us, we are seemingly still in the condition of separation. Whether you're a scientist looking through a microscope or you're sitting in Zazen, we experience ourselves in the condition of separation. I know that. I know that. Whatever that is. So separation. The teachings say that separation is both utterly enchanting, because we're separate from things, we have all the juice of anticipation and desire and purpose and direction, all of that color of human life. So this, in a sense, condition of alienation is utterly enchanting, and it's also the source of existential ennui. It's actually the place of the heart feeling a lack, an emptiness, a paucity. The gap is the self. The self is the gap. The gap creates the self. The self and restlessness and discontent, they co-emerge. That's the theory that we are presented with anyway, and one of the things we're invited to investigate in our practice. So, Prajna Paramita. By definition, whatever I say about it is wrong. It's at best an echo or a finger pointing, and at worst, it's like a turd. What you say about Prajnaparamita is what's left over after the direct experience, and it's really no longer able to offer direct nourishment. But Prajnaparamita is not a thing apart and separate. So even the turd embodies its truth. even the confusion that these explanations or these teachings from me or someone else engender is the diaphanous, mercurial flesh of the goddess. Robert Aiken-Roshi said that if a Zen teacher begins to explain emptiness, shunyata, the teachings of Prajna, a true student gets up and leaves the room. Now, I've never had such chutzpah, but I would definitely respect it. You should be curious about why that is. Why is the explanation of something like this often just a turd? However, even the old luminaries went into the weeds, the ancestors. So the sixth ancestor, Huineng, he spoke about Prajnaparamita in the great Platform Sutra. And one of the things Huineng said was, self-nature contains the 10,000 things. This is the meaning of Maha. Self-nature contains the 10,000 things. The meaning of Maha. So back to the goddess, and the goddess being transpersonal. When awareness is not yours, the precondition is met. When awareness is not yours, the precondition is met. When the my of my body, my mind, my awareness, my practice, when that my is clarified, we're at the gate. We're inside the shrine. You can reflect on your own experience right now of your sense consciousnesses. Are you doing, feeling, seeing, hearing, or thinking? Is that something that you are doing? All of these things are happening essentially without our will or choice. Even if you close your eyes, you're still seeing. Even if you go to sleep, you're still seeing. The vital force, the animating energy in us, is a mystery that doesn't get resolved. It's an intimate remoteness, that which is living through us. So this investigation and meeting the precondition of awareness and body and thought no longer being my, nor being someone else's, is what Zazen is for. Sometimes we call this non-attachment. Negation is not our destination in Zen. Negation is a stepping stone, you could say. Emptiness is not the goal. No self is not awakening. Zen is a tradition of non-duality. In non-duality, it's not mine or not mine, not self or other, not experienced or experiencer. Freedom from the binary is what our Zen ancestors celebrated. Freedom from the binary. Fluidity within the binary. Not one or separate. Even deeper, freedom from is and is not. Freedom from is and is not. And I'll try to take that out of what seems philosophical into more direct experience. You could argue that knowledge, especially ordinary knowledge, is de facto one way or another. A phenomena, a person, a place or thing, a feeling, an idea or belief is one way or another. It is something. We affirm it as X, and therefore it is not Y. This is the relative world. Water is not fire. Mushin is not Jogen. But Prajnaparamita, because the whole universe is her body, she has no position. Think about it. You meet someone at a gathering for the first time. You walk in the room, and you have the sensory datum perceived. Okay? So you see the shape of a face, you see the color of a skin, you see length of hair, you see the body type. You have the sensory datum perceived, and of course, even that has a bias in its focus. And habitually, whether right away or not, you have a stance towards them. You have positioned them in the relative hierarchy of friend or enemy, attractive or not attractive, friendly or closed, trustworthy or fickle. We walk in a room and the mind is making its effort to put everybody in their position. Everyone's in their category. We know our place because we know theirs. We look around the room and we know how we feel about the painting. It's beautiful or it's not. It's well painted or it's not. Now, ordinary knowing can have a relative wisdom to it. So I'm not saying these assessments aren't accurate. And maybe you have a fabulous intuition about people, and you're right that someone's not trustworthy. But what I'm pointing out is the instinctive taking of a position. Taking of a position. Someone says something and you instinctively, compulsively agree or don't agree. Especially around opinions and views, this reveals itself to us so clearly. We're in a discussion and someone is saying something, and whether in our mind or in our bodies, it's letting us know we agree or we don't. You eat the hors d'oeuvres and you conclude it's delicious or not. It's well prepared or it's amateur. It's an instinctive taking of position. We maybe don't even think there's another choice. Now, of course, we can be indifferent to things. We can be in a discussion and totally be checked out. We can be spaced out and not take a position. But if we're engaged, the mind takes one side or another. The ordinary mind does. So why do we have this instinctive taking of a position? What is the function of that? Ordinary mind is fickle. It both takes positions and can easily abandon them. We can watch how it can have no allegiance to its position. We take this side and now that side. We change our minds change on us. You could say that this itself is the play of the goddess, that our own minds, opinions, and beliefs are ungraspable. That even this fickleness of mind embodies this freedom from the binaries. The challenge of binaries are at the heart of our practice. I don't know if there actually is a common root here, but binaries and binding are pretty similar. So in our practice, or in your practice, have you noticed when you meditate that the binary of my mind is quiet and my mind it's busy is a core feature? Many people meditate for years and they basically just are in this binary. My mind is quiet or it's busy. And quiet is on the side of success and busy is on the side of failure. Our approach to meditation itself is binary. Or we're hearing, a turd-like talk like this, and we say, I get it, or I don't. Just be curious, is your mind doing that? I'm wondering if you're getting it. I'm wondering if I get it. My mind is taking a position about the very things I'm saying. But see if that's going on in your own consciousness. I understand or I don't. Is there another option? We practice for a while, and then before we know it, I'm making progress or I'm not. The beginner's mind, the joy of just like starting the practice and being okay with not knowing how to really do it, without needing to have any sense of authority, we lose that. And we're in the binary of I'm making progress or I'm not. And we start comparing ourselves to others to check our progress, another binary. Is someone else succeeding or are they failing? Who's succeeding? Is the teacher succeeding? They must be succeeding because they're the teacher. So I want to succeed too. I want to go from not getting it to getting it. We face the subtle and vital binary, the challenge of the binary of body versus mind. We can read about the oneness of body and mind all we want, but we are deeply conditioned. And we tend to think that mind is here and the body's down there, and our meditation follows suit. Our meditation is like a meat suit. There's a mind that animates a meat suit. So the binary of body and mind haunts us. We see through its eyes. We're faced with the binary of awareness and the things known by awareness. You might take your meditation to the point where you have this sense of the witness in which you can't go beyond. You feel like that somehow there is still something that is barring your intimacy with the 10,000 things, as the old masters would say. So we still have the binary between mind and matter externally. Awareness and the things of awareness, we feel that as a dissonance. They're not in harmony. What does it mean to be one with heaven and earth? What are they talking about? We have the binary of teacher and student and all the joy and tension and conflict that necessarily and ultimately, hopefully, beneficently arises. We have the binary of sudden and gradual. We hear that awakening is right here, that the present moment is Zen, but then we feel this present moment is really crummy. I don't like this present moment at all. If this is Zen, I don't want to have anything to do with it. So then we buy a book like a Tibetan Buddhist book where we can hear about all these stages of practice that we can gradually go through and get to the good stuff. All the binaries. In Zen, we celebrate not knowing. Can you see how it's so impossible to leap clear of binaries unless you speak in haiku? We were talking about ordinary knowing, and now we're talking about not knowing. We're still in it. Not knowing you could call a mode of awareness or an orientation to your life or experience. Someone called it existential humility, and I really loved that. We see there's a certain arrogance operating in our presumption of knowing who people are. We see that there's a pride operating in our knowing what things are. There's an arrogance in our conclusions about what's going on. It's a presumption of knowledge. We actually don't know, but because the mind is so uncomfortable without taking a position, it clicks into one. We'd rather be right than happy. So we practice not knowing. It's existential humility. It's an openness. We could call it a less biased fielding of experience. I'm biased towards feeling that it's not possible to be unbiased. So that's my bias. In not knowing, we have a less biased fielding of experience. A lot of that is cleared away. And perhaps we start to be able to embody not knowing because we bear witness to how much folly and pain come from the presumption of knowledge. It's really important in Zen to see how stupid we are. To repeatedly see how stupid we are is the practice of Zen. That means that you have some conclusion about something, and then you're awake enough to be proved wrong. The best realm for this is relationships. You have conclusion about somebody, or you have a preemptive disaster scenario about an event that's going to unfold. you're aware you have that, you go to the event and you see that your conclusion and the event actually don't match, and that helps us let go a little bit. We can become a little less fixated because we see that often we're dumb. Often we have a presumption of knowledge. We come to decisions where they're unwarranted. And so we become a little less decided on what things are. We become a little less sure about what we are and where we stand. And knowing where we stand and knowing where others stand actually becomes something less tasteful. It may even become distasteful. From touching the position of not knowing, we actually feel knowing as a contraction, a diminishment of possibility. We learn to empty the mind and to experience what we call stillness, another binary. And less of life is filtered through with language and thought. Sometimes this finds us in a condition of surprise, of meeting things very freshly. I'm afraid to say there's some connection, I'm not saying it's a direct connection, but some connection between like amnesia and innocence and the condition of not knowing. Because there's a freshness of mind. There's a way in which we can experience the moment in a virgin condition. There's a renewal. There's a meeting of things fresh. I think of a lot of long-time practitioners I know, but especially Shodo Harada Roshi. And one of the, from the ego's perspective, unsavory things about this is he never remembers who you are. Some people have studied with him for years and years and gone to retreats, and he just can't remember because he's in this condition where each moment is totally fresh. So his assistant reminds him of who you are, and then he goes, oh yeah, I remember. So we are developing in our practice an increasing tolerance for uncertainty. We, I think, as human beings, want to get away from uncertainty more than anything. And thus we have all this groping for knowledge. We begin to appreciate the taste of uncertainty, the energy of it. You become enlivened by uncertainty. There's an energy that was allocated to a position. This party is this, or it's that. This person is X, or they're Z. There's an energy that's bound up in that conclusion, and that energy gets freed, and it animates us in a particular way. So not knowing sometimes becomes a form of knowing. It becomes co-opted. It becomes another object for the ego to have. Maybe there's a hidden pride at how open we are. We start thinking of ourselves as non-judgmental. We're still knowing. Do we have another option? Can you invite the mind into that option? This whole talk is revolving around the binary of having or not having a position. How do you free awareness from that binary? In wakefulness, in mindfulness kept steadily lit over time in practice, good as a conclusion undermines itself. Nothing is entirely good. In wakefulness kept steadily lit over time in practice, bad as a conclusion undermines itself. Nothing is entirely bad. In mindfulness and wakefulness kept steadily lit over time in practice, doing it right as a conclusion undermines itself. You can't say how to do it right. Have you ever left a conversation, and I know this happens to me, the more I practice this happens, with a distaste that you only expressed part of your truth? You had, maybe let's say it was a passionate conversation, and for whatever reason, the other person talked too much, or you were caught up in one train of thought, or there wasn't enough time, you only were able to say how you feel, one side of how you feel. You were only able to speak one side about how you actually see an issue, and you leave that conversation and it doesn't feel right. You weren't able to really say the whole thing. You can't actually say the whole thing. So we practice and positions become less and less compelling. We don't pull the stake up necessarily. We're untethered in a different way. We find that life is neither a dream nor real. We find that suffering and satisfaction are unfindable. We look closely and neither of them are something that we can actually touch. We stop desiring them even. Maha Prajna Paramita. Bowing to her. Can we bow in no direction? Can you bow in no direction? Can you be a devotee without an object of adoration? If we face this dilemma of duality, if we face this dilemma of duality, this dilemma of positions, as an enemy, we reinforce the whole hero and dragon scenario. We're going to slay it and get the treasure. But what are you going to do about the hero then? Who's going to slay the hero? In the teachings, they talk about the limitation of self-power. Japanese Buddhism has this binary of self-power and other power. And it's said that Zen is a self-power practice, meaning you gather your own personal power and will and commitment and vitality, and you do Zazen, and that energy bears fruit in awakening. We feel the limitation of that, because who's going to slay the hero? We feel the incompleteness of passive surrender to a divine, where we basically give ourselves up to a power outside of ourselves and forfeit our own volition, our own responsibility. So this is the pickle of Maha Prajna Paramita. The scripture says the whole universe is her body. The whole universe is her body. When the whole universe is her body, you can't take a position because you're everywhere. You have a left hand and a right hand, but it's all your body. The scriptures say Maha Prajna Paramita is untouchable, and yet she's everywhere and everywhere touched. That she's a mystery that needn't nor can be all tidied up. So we have the teaching on Maha Prajna Paramita, and as interesting and compelling as they sound, what do we do about the heart? Because many of us look inside and we find clinging to positions and we find suffering, and that calls to us for resolution. So what to do about the heart? That's where the stream led me this afternoon. Thank you for listening.